Hidden within a crescent-shaped gorge in the Sahyadri hills of Maharashtra, carved into the rock face above the Wagora River, lies one of Asia's greatest treasures. These are not just caves. They are temples of silence, sanctuaries of devotion, and storybooks in stone, painted with passion and preserved by time. This is Ajanta. Located about 100 kilometers from Aurangabad, now Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, the Ajanta Caves are a UNESCO World Heritage Site, renowned for their stunning rock-cut architecture and ancient Buddhist paintings. Long forgotten and buried beneath the forest canopy, Ajanta was rediscovered in 1819 by a British officer on a tiger hunt, an accidental encounter that brought this ancient wonder back into the world's view. What he found was astonishing. Cave walls covered with vibrant paintings, untouched for over 1,000 years. But the story of Ajanta begins centuries before that, nearly 2,200 years ago. Ajanta was built in two main phases. The first phase began around the 2nd century BCE, during the early Theravada Buddhist tradition. These caves were simple, places for monks to meditate, live, and worship. The second phase, far more elaborate, unfolded between 460 and 480 CE under the patronage of Vakataka King Harisena, a powerful ally of the Gupta Empire. Across both phases, artisans carved viharas, monastic halls, and chaityas, worship halls housing stupas, directly into the basalt cliffs, using little more than chisels, hammers, and devotion. What truly sets Ajanta apart are its murals, among the finest surviving examples of ancient Indian painting. Inside caves 1, 2, 16, and 17, the walls come alive with Jataka tales, bodhisattvas, and royal scenes from everyday life. In Cave 1, the famous Padmapani Bodhisattva radiates compassion with a single glance. Holding a lotus surrounded by celestial beings, he represents Avalokiteshvara, the embodiment of boundless compassion in Mahāyana Buddhism. On the right wall near the entrance of Cave 1, facing the famous Padmapani, stands the figure identified as Vajrapāṇi Bodhisattva, the embodiment of spiritual power and protection in Mahāyana Buddhism. Across the painted surface of Cave 17, a full tale unfolds. Not just a single scene, but a story in motion. Shipwreck, seduction, escape, and return. It is the visual arc of Sinhala, a merchant, a survivor, and eventually a king. The story begins with Sinhala and 500 merchants shipwrecked on a distant island called Tamradvipa, a place that at first seems like paradise. They are welcomed by beautiful women who offer them comfort, companionship, and pleasure. But the island hides a terrible truth. The women are rakshasis, flesh-eating ogresses in disguise. Today, we understand that rakshasis, like their male counterparts, the Rakshasas, were not always demons. In Sri Lanka, the Rakshasas are remembered as one of the ancient Hela clans, not monsters, but ancestors. Sinhala senses danger. One night he wakes and begins to wonder why the merchants were warned never to travel south. He uses a ladder to reach a hidden part of the island and discovers the truth. Then he escapes with the help of a divine horse who soared across the sea. While the others are overcome and devoured, Sinhala alone survives and returns home. This story shares striking parallels with the older Vallahasa Jātaka, a Theravada tale dating back to the early centuries BCE, in which a flying horse rescues shipwrecked men from deceptive yakinis. Many scholars see the story of Sinhala as a later evolution of this parable, one that adds kingship, return, and karmic consequence. But unlike the older version, where some men resisted temptation and escaped, the story of Sinhala makes him the sole survivor, the only one steadfast enough to make it home. But the story doesn't end there. The demoness who loved him follows him in disguise, infiltrates the royal court, and unleashes another wave of destruction. Once again, Sinhala leads the charge, warning the king, gathering an army, and confronting the Rakshasis in battle. In the final scenes, Sinhala is crowned king. He returns to the island, this time not as a victim, but as a conqueror, to reclaim it from illusion and chaos. This is not merely a tale of demons and battles. It is a story of insight, of illusion unmasked, of a man who saw beyond the surface and changed the course of fate. Centuries later, in Sri Lanka, a different but parallel story would emerge. The tale of Prince Vijaya, who arrives on an island, meets a yakini named Kuweni, and whose arrival would be recorded as the beginning of a new royal lineage, though the land had long been ruled by Hela people. Kuweni is described as a yakini, a being often connected with the Rakshasas. In older traditions, both Yakas and Rakshasas were remembered not as demons, but as two of the great Hela clans who once ruled this land. The Ajanta mural reflects a Buddhist parable known centuries before the island's origin stories were written down, a tale the chronicles would later retell with different names but familiar truths. The story of Sinhala, captured not in words but in color, form, and the stillness of a wall, has survived for over 1,000 years. Around the same time, in another part of the Buddhist world, another masterpiece was coming to life. Far to the south, in Sri Lanka, King Kashyapa I commissioned the majestic rock citadel of Sigiriya, its frescoes painted between 477 and 485 CE, high upon the sheer western face of the rock. These Sigiriya maidens, adorned in jewels and vibrant silks, float across the stone in serene expressions and graceful poses. When viewed alongside the murals of Ajanta, the similarities are striking. Almond-shaped eyes and soft, meditative faces, curved postures and elegant hand gestures, rich ornamentation and a shared sense of symbolic beauty. Two compelling theories emerge from this connection. One holds that Sri Lankan artists may have been invited to Ajanta, not just as observers but as skilled contributors. Another suggests that Gupta-era styles from Ajanta found their way south, influencing the Sigiriya frescoes during Kasyapa's reign. While historical evidence remains inconclusive, the artistic dialogue between these two sites reveals a shared cultural rhythm, carried across seas by monks, merchants, and the quiet flow of ideas. Ajanta was more than an artistic marvel. It was a living monastery, a center for meditation, storytelling, and the teaching of Dharma. Here, faith was not just spoken, but painted, made visible for pilgrims, monks, and future generations. Ajanta's legacy reached far beyond its cliffs, shaping Buddhist visual traditions across distant lands and generations. Walking through Ajanta today is like stepping into a forgotten dream. The shadows, the silence, the eyes of bodhisattvas still watching. It's a sacred encounter with time itself. To get there, it's about a 2.5-hour drive from Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, formerly known as Aurangabad. Keep in mind, the caves are closed on Mondays. You're allowed to take photos, but without flash, and some caves are quite dim inside. For the softest lighting and fewer crowds, try visiting in the morning or late afternoon. Take your time. Each cave tells a story. Each wall holds a world. As you leave Ajanta, its stories stay with you, painted not just on walls but in memory. Gratitude to the ancient hands that shaped these sacred walls, and to you for walking with me through time. But just beyond these hills lies another wonder. At Ellora, stone is not painted, it is carved. Temples rise from the cliffs, where Buddhists, Hindus, and Jains sculpted their faith into eternity. In the next episode, we journey to Ellora, where devotion meets architecture and the sacred becomes stone. This is Hela Nomad in Search of Helis.